Hello, my name is Treenie. I am an independent dairy consultant. I work for myself and it's the Dairy Vet.
My name's Charlie Casey and I work for Carnhill Holstein farm.
Dry cow management is hugely important for all dairy cows and sets them up for the next lactation. So this is what we call the transition period. And most of your metabolic problems, about 70 to 80% of your metabolic problems, so that's your milk fevers, your LDAs, RDAs, ketosis, and then all the subsequent dirty calf beds, you can get mastitis, all of those things originate in the transition period. So that's the 3 weeks prior to calving. Maintaining dry matter intake prior to calving is absolutely key. So we need to look at rumen and fill in these dry cows. Low dry matter intake means that we'll have a higher risk of ketosis, both pre and post calving, and that will ultimately result in LDAs, poor early lactation performance, higher risk of disease, and then lower fertility. We also need to make sure that these dry cows are of an appropriate body condition score. So we're looking at probably a body condition score of around 2.75 to 3. And we need to make sure that these cows do not put on any condition through the dry period. So we really have to make sure that we control the energy intake. If we can do this and we can ensure that they maximize their dry matter intake, then we will lower the subclinical ketosis risk and improve milk yield in early lactation. This all then leads on to maintenance of body condition throughout the lactation and ultimately cows going back in calf more quickly. Why is it really important to manage calcium well prior to calving? Calcium is required for muscle contraction and for the immune system. So we obviously don't want our clinical milk fevers, but we also really don't want the rumen to contract slower. We want the calf bed to contract so that the cow can clean, and we want the immune system to work as well as it possibly can because the cow is really susceptible to disease at this point. How we manage our dry cow group is also really important. So I'm thinking of group batching, moving of dry cows coming up to the point of calving. All these things, we don't think much about it, but it's very stressful to the cow. It takes cows up to 2 weeks to resort their social hierarchy. So moving cows in the last 10 to 14 days prior to calving, when they're already transitioning, disrupts the hierarchy and drops the feed intake, so reduces the dry matter intake. And studies show that this can reduce dry matter intake by 0.5 to 1.5 kilos of dry matter per day for 1 to 3 days. This is the last thing we want to do with these high-risk animals. We also need to make sure that these dry cows always have access to fresh feed, especially after being moved. So dry cows should definitely be fed a minimum of once per day, and it should be pushed up very regularly. So the diet here is really specific. It's a pre-calva diet. It's really palatable, energy dense, really well mixed, and it's got a calcium binder in it to minimize the effect of calcium drop at calving. Space, comfort, and ventilation directly affect immune function and feed intakes. So we need to provide these girls absolutely luxury accommodation. Clean, dry beds to reduce mastitis risk and make sure that cows calve in with a low cell count in early lactation. These girls need to lie for 12 to 14 hours per day, and every hour lost in lying times reduces rumen function and feed intake. We also ought to provide more cubicles in the house than we have cows, so we ought to have at least 1.1 cubicle per cow to avoid competition. Make sure that everybody can lie down when they want to and when they need to. And we need plenty of feed space as well for these girls. They're pregnant, they're big cows, so we need plenty of access to that feed. So 0.75 meters, 75 centimeters of feed space per cow is ideal. Water access is also hugely important. We very often find it's lacking in the dry cow housing in the calving pen. Dry matter intake is directly proportionate to water intake, and water generally costs very little. So we need to ensure that we have a minimum of 20 centimeters of water space per cow, and we need 1 drinker per group of 20 cows. As you've just seen, Charlie's just brought a cow over. She's at the point of calving. There's water blob there. She was sitting perfectly comfortably in the pre-calva group with all her friends, and she's now come over to a group pen with other animals. So to minimize the dry matter intake drop, which we know is going to happen before calving, Charlie and Connor do everything in their power here to make sure the cows spend as little time in this calving pen as possible. they've got access to really fresh, palatable feed, and it's the same feed as they had in the pre-calver group. The cow's brought in here, and say she calves by herself, so we reduce any stress by leaving her to do it by herself. But the pen is really open and visual so that Charlie can watch the cows from a distance and not upset them.
So, as you can see here, when a cow is freshly calved, we come in straight away and get the calf into the box pen as soon as possible. Then she comes through this kind of cut bar here and she can lick away at them. So when the cow's brought over, just the robot's in there. We take her around, bring her into the robot, and there's an option at the side to dump the milk into the bucket. And then we have the colostrum right there. We're able to test it to see, if we need to add any colostrum powder to it.
So it's really important that the calf is born and then moved into a clean environment. So we would call this a cuddle box, which means the calf gets a clean space, but mummy can still access it. She can still lick it. She can lick it dry, but the calf is not in the environment of the group pen. It's then fed its colostrum and moved very quickly. Then once it's dry and clean and we know it's okay, it's moved quickly to a clean individual pen. Navel dipping is really important to newborn calves. Why do we do it? Well, lots of infections gain access into the calf's body through that wet navel. So if we dip it in an iodine solution, then that reduces the risk of umbilical infections, so navel ill, and then the joint ills that we get after that. When should we do it? Well, within 2 hours of birth, most people will dip navels as soon as the calf is born when they go to check the calf is okay. What should we use? High iodine. So we want that iodine concentration to be at least 7%, if not higher. And how should we do it? Don't just spray the navel. You need a dip cup. If you spray the navel, then it's inevitable that you will miss parts of the navel. So use a dip cup, get the whole navel into that cup, and make sure the entire stump is covered in iodine. It's really good to use disposable cups or dip bottles so that we don't contaminate. It's really good to re-dip 12 to 18 hours later if the navel is still moist. And you really ought to replace that iodine solution every few days to ensure that it is as potent, because most iodines are alcohol-based and alcohol will evaporate. So every time a cow calves, she gets a post-calving drench, lukewarm water, and it's a drink that is full of sugar, calcium, and energy for her. And as you can see, they love it.